Welcome again. We shall continue our discussion on the decline and resurgence of political theory. I have already discussed with you the factors of the decline of political theory. Now we will discuss about the resurgence of political theory after a period of what scholars like David Easton say was the decline of political theory. So, therefore, as we have seen, political theory was considered for several decades as having been on the decline. But that declining condition does not necessarily indicate the death of political theory, as some other people have propagated, or some other people have proposed. Certainly certain amount of attachment to value conception, and then the apathy towards the application of scientific methods and techniques, and of course the predominance of philosophy over political theory have made political science or political theory considerably irrelevant in the real world. Apart from that, we also discuss about the the dominance of moral theory. So all these aspects have certainly affected the growth of political theory. But we must understand that that does not necessarily mean that political theory was dead. There is a subtle distinction between the two arguments, that is the decline and the death of political theory. So, to begin with, for a very long time, political science and political theory as part of political science has always been an important branch of social sciences. And political science was and is still very popular subject, and it is studied in almost every university even till today. Till the Second World War, the study of political science generally then till that point of time meant that it is a study of different political organizations or institutions, or rather it is the study of the state and the different organizations or institutions or association within it. And within the state, so institutions like the legislature, the executive, the judiciary, then political parties, pressure groups, then many other things became the subject matter of political science, and therefore till that time the subject of political theory was limited to these issues. And of course even political theory revolved around these traditional conceptions. And this traditional outlook, in many ways, therefore, it made the political theory irrelevant and dwarfed, and even the content and scope of political theory then became limited. So, especially in the field of policy making, in matters of policy making, since political theory was limited to these aspects, it was limited to the history of political ideas, it was limited to to moral theory, and so on and so forth. The role of political theory in decision making, especially in policy matters, was limited, or it didn't play that much of an important role. And therefore, as I said, the role that political theory should have played was dwarfed by these conditions. However, the real scope of political theory is much broader than the one envisaged by the traditional thinkers. And the role of political theory is meant to help policy making, to help in the understanding of how institutions should function, what are the ideal institutions, and so on and so forth, and also to evolve innovative mechanism to make the institutions relevant for all times, or also the role of political theory would have been to evolve according to the political behavior of the society. Now, coming to the commencement or the resurgence or the beginning of that resurgence, the post-war, post-Second World War period, especially the 1950s onwards, in many ways help us to see a new directions in the development of political theory. And therefore, one can say that, that war or the Second World War has served as a dividing line between the old and the new concepts of political theory. Large number of scholars, whether it was from Europe, they were from Europe, America, and so on and so forth, they began to involve in various serious research, especially on the development of the political theory, and the interest was rather not to lie on traditional understanding of political theory, but rather to evolve new ways of understanding, or new ways, or rather to evolve new parameters of political theory by giving emphasis on data analysis, on rigorous research, and on facts and figures, and contextualizing them according to the political behavior. So, through this commencement of the resurgence of political theory, these scholars also arrived at a conclusion that the traditional method of analyzing political phenomena and theory was certainly not enough, not adequate for the reformation of, or the rejuvenation of the field of political theory, or rather the scientific study of analyzing political aspects. So therefore, new methods were being devised, and this tendency finally laid to the foundation of a new way of studying political theory. So, of course, there are critics who have written, that consequently a large new generations provided the impetus for the search of new kind of political science. And the main resurgence, of course, was found in the United States, when the American Political Science Association and the Rockefeller Foundation played the pioneering role. And many scholars and researchers, gathered together at various research institutes and universities, and they took the responsibility to, to develop political theory, and through the help or the enrichment of empirical approach to the study of political science. So, therefore, when we look about all this, we must also understand, especially the next stage, is the resurgence, which is multifaceted form of pluralism. So therefore, the resurgence of political theory took place, as I said, after the Second World War, and they assumed various shapes and manifestations. and therefore, some of these manifestations are actually the form of pluralism in terms of ideas, in terms of accommodating various research, various arguments, various concepts, and so on and so forth. So pluralism, by pluralism I mean the emphasis that in any society there are obviously numerous individuals who cherish different tastes, different interests, different values, and different ideas, and therefore allowing these ideas are the responsibility of any liberal tradition, and therefore this liberal tradition in a form of pluralism is something which actually is the contribution of political theory, as well as similarly this pluralism also allows political theory to evolve, to develop to various stages. So, so one of the very important aspect of this pluralism, considering that, as I said, that through the help of political theory, the emergence of the idea of pluralism, especially believing in individuals' choices, believing in people's desire for various tastes, various interests, and having various maybe ethical values, and so on and so forth. Therefore, all this also help in evolving a society, and also evolving a state or an authority that was free from any sort of imposition of any decision upon the people. Especially, it helped in curtailing the autocratic behavior of the state. So therefore, in any such liberal society, or in such plural society, it was then new ideas evolved that there can exist number of institutions and organizations to cater to the interests and values of individuals and different societies. So after the 1950s, states in Europe and America, they also realized that they cannot necessarily stop various variety of individuals' desire and interest, and therefore, with this, it also helped scholars in political science or political scientists to propound doctrine that there might be conflict among individuals. Yes, so far as the tastes and interests are concerned, but that should not necessarily create an atmosphere of animosity or a long-drawn struggle, as Karl Marx and his followers assume, in the form of class struggle, in the form of class antagonism. So therefore, this pluralism proceeded to prove that pluralist society is much better than a regimented society. So therefore, with this pluralism also assumes the need for class struggle, of course, a revolution for an ordered life, an ordered society, but plural society also endowed with certain self-regulating mechanism which have enough ability to put society in order without necessarily having to impose, having to go through certain levels of animosity, certain levels of struggle. So even during the heyday of the traditional political theory, this pluralism was believed to have existed, and therefore after the Second World War, it was received with so much of impetus, and therefore varieties of ideas and concepts then rapidly developed to the advance of pluralism, And as I said, this advancement of pluralism helped in the resurgence of political theory. Now, how do we analyze the resurgence of political theory? We can analyze this by the emergence of, a new thought, which is called as behaviorism. Okay, behavioralism is one of the most important aspects of the resurgence of political theory, especially which took place during the beginning of the 50s of the 19th centuries, of the 20th centuries. So now, what is behavioralism? So, in short, behavioralism can be considered as a social theories that can be constructed on the basis of observable facts and behaviors, which can be quantifiable, which can be quantified through data and facts. Behaviorism also maintains that various segments of human behavior are both observable and quantifiable, which can be quantified. So after thorough study, thorough analysis of the behavior and the facts and the data, a certain conclusion can be brought in, and therefore these conclusion drawn from all this can be developed as the models for political theory. That is what behavioralism tells us. So, which means that behavioralism in political science, therefore, it does not necessarily deal with all sorts of behavior of individuals, but only with that behavior which displays political character. So this is the role of behavioralism in the field of political science. So I repeat again that what is the role of behavioralism? Behavioralism is actually a way of constructing ideas on the basis of what can be observed through the behavior, and also through data that can be quantified. Data and facts which can be quantified. And therefore, for behavioralism, there are various segments of human behavior that can be observable and that can also be quantified. And therefore, by analyzing all this with the help of facts and data, certainly conclusions can be drawn, and these conclusions drawn can be a form of models for political theory. Okay, and as I said, when we talk of behavioralism in political science, it means only those behavior which display certain political characteristics. So the behavioralists, they analyze and scrutinize the behavior, then adopt methods and techniques that are generally, even are being adopted by natural and physical sciences. And one of the biggest, or one of the major proponent of this kind of approach is certainly David Easton. And as I said earlier, so with the help of behavioralism, it opened new ways, new areas, new vistas of political theory, and at the same time, through the help of behavioralism, political science, political theory was also able to inject new blood and to also move away from moral theory. And but there are certain limitations, and the main argument against this theory or this approach is that this theory could not utter the last word about the status of political theory. Now, with the beginning of the resurgence of political theory, especially the contributions of behavioralism in this particular aspect, we have another terrain of thought which also help in the resurgence of political theory. Of course, there are many other things, but let us discuss this another very important thing, that is the emergence of the theory of justice or the normative theory of John Rawls. So in the 1960s, behavioralism also faced some kind of challenges from several corners of academic world. And one of them is, of course, John Rawls, who published his book, Theory of Justice, in 1971. For John Rawls believed that justice is the first virtue of social institutions, and therefore justice as the virtue of social institution is the truth and is the system of thought. John Rawls' theory of justice, therefore, through a gauntlet of Eastern's behavioralism into major challenge. So therefore, John Rawls, what he has done is he reversed the position of Eastern, and he took on the nature of political reality. So therefore, what John Rawls has done is he added new value or new notion to the idea of political theory, and this new notion, new value of political theory is what John Rawls calls as justice. And he says that justice are not unreal. They are not unreal, but they are real. Okay. And that must therefore be understood. That must be one way in which we understand political reality, in which we will be able to penetrate the realm of political theory. So, what actually John Rawls wanted to do was to emphasize that empirical theory cannot explain all the aspects of political theory, and therefore the utter last word about its nature and content is also limited. So he also argues that nor can this kind of political theory actually produce viable theory of politics unless some value notion is added, like he has added justice. So to him, empirical theory has failed to give recognition to a value theory. Any political theory, he says, must be normative theory. It must be normative theory. So in the opinion of John Rawls, therefore, all social theory, all organizations and institutions should aim at ensuring justice. And if authority fails to ensure that there is justice, then the entire social structure will face crisis, and numerous difficulties and problems. So what John Rawls is trying to tell us is that yes, facts and figures are okay, but there should be some value, and that value is, if you are talking about politics, then for politics, the characteristic of politics is justice. Therefore, he argues, John Rawls makes an argument, you can say that for John Rawls, political science is about the governing of all the available resources and ensuring that through the governance or through good governance, which provide justice, the resources available in the society is available for every member of that society, and the most or maybe the member who suffers the most, or the member who is at the bottom of the society, who might be struggling because of disability, because of so many other problems of society, they should be able to avail those resources in a better way so that they can also come up to the same level with others. So this is the nature of distributive justice. This is the nature of justice for John Rawls, and therefore if a political institution is not able to do that, if a political institution is not able to give justice to its citizens, then that institution will definitely face crisis. Okay, it's going to face various forms of crisis, and therefore you will also encounter various problems. So therefore, throughout the book of Theory of Justice, it is John Rawls was trying to offer us the innovation of developing political theory to a new level. So in this particular context, you can say that David Easton and other behavioralists, of course, they were of the opinion that value judgment and normative theory are incompatible with empirical analysis. Yet John Rawls brought back that normative idea of theory. So therefore, with the emergence of this value addition of John Rawls, there is the combination of normative theory, which is dependent on values, dependent on values like which forms the characteristic of politics, along with the empirical analysis or the help of facts and figures. So therefore, in this way, normative theory, it has been argued that it cannot be explained by methods of natural and physical sciences. But what John Rawls did was he challenged this notion by saying that normative theory is quite compatible with science. And John Rawls does not find any inconsistencies between science and moral theory or normative theory. So therefore, John Rawls made attempt, to show to the world that moral theory is more or less isoformic, or it is similar in various forms or with theories of natural science, and that moral knowledge, it stands on ground as solid as that of empirical knowledge. So therefore, in the past, there was no belief of facts and figures. There was hardly any study, any development of political theory based on the available data. With the emergence of behavioralism, they give emphasis to observable facts, to data, to figures, and so on and so forth. With the coming of John Rawls, again, there is the combination of the two, and therefore it is interesting to note that John Rawls has to various extent, modified the prevailing notion about morality and science. Why I'm saying this is that John Rawls does not necessarily force political science to judge, but rather he is giving them new terrain of believing, of understanding the characteristic, the nature of politics, and therefore the nature of understanding that politics. So according to John Rawls, both, as I said earlier, both moral theory and natural science must begin with data. And the data of science are empirical observation, and the data for ethical theory are moral judgments. So in this way, you can say that John Rawls tried to prove that moral theory cannot be set aside, or ignored on the ground that it is not based on empiricism. So what John Rawls has done is he is applying that moral values, the notion of justice, on the basis of facts and figures, on the basis of observable facts and figures that can be quantified. Okay, so therefore John Rawls' attempt is really revolutionary, and it poses great challenge to Easton's behavioralism, and in this way we can say that it also helped in the resurgence of political theory. So let us stop here. There are of course many other ways of looking at the resurgence of political theory, but these two important aspects are important for us: empiricism, facts and figures, the contribution of David Easton, and then the contribution of John Rawls, that tries to tell us that if we are going to study about institutions, political institutions, organizations, and so on and so forth, it is necessary that the terrain of those should start with the notion of justice, because politics, governance is all about providing justice for all. So with that, we can say that political theory has been rejuvenated with new innovative ideas, new innovative methods, and therefore we can say that this is the beginning of the resurgence of political theory. So thank you very much. I think I will end here, and the last topic that I want to discuss in this particular unit is the death of ideology. Thank you so much.